with Mr. Hitesh Bhatia, who is the SVP Marketing for Vayana Network. Hitesh?
So, thank you for this opportunity. I would have loved if Iyer could have come, but I hope I'm able to do justice on his behalf. So, thanks to MCCIA and the whole governing council who's invited us here today. And some of you may know about Vayana, some of you may not. So, I'll quickly run through a small presentation about us. And I think Mr. Monga really gave a lot of crux of what I wanted to share. But here we go. So, Vayana is one of the largest B2B trade finance platforms in the country, very proudly headquartered in Pune. And Iyer, again, I would again say that he really kind of holds MCCI in a high regard. And we would love to kind of work more on those, lines of where we can work together. But, to quickly go through, so Vayana has done about 60,000 crores of, disbursements till date. We have enabled that finance to over 300 supply chains across 50,000 MSMEs, and which would spread about 25 industries. And how we do it is that, we structure the SCF programs for the corporates. We create a whole digital infrastructure wherein the cost for MSME or the corporate goes down, and there is no additional investment in capex. And the overall the supply chain gets automated. There's a better utilization and there's better coverage. And when we continuously monitor it through our analytic tools that we have, which I'll talk about quickly. And the whole idea is that we have run a zero default sort of lending program since inception in 2017, which is, I think, a very, very big sort of task in a country like India, where collections, lending is easy, disposal is easy, collections is where the challenge starts for even the best of the best. Going back, Mr. Monga had talked about the lending on the consumer front, and that's exactly what we say, that JAM, the Jan Dhan, Aadhaar, and Mobile Trinity made it very easy for a lot of us to get credit or do a lot of our payments also. And I was just talking to a colleague yesterday that, we can't imagine if you have to travel outside India to think of a world where we'll probably using cards, and we'll probably have to, even if it is a tap and pay, UPI has really, made it cardless and formless for us and really friction free. So, the next wave is now happening on, lending to corporate or a small business. And GST, e-invoicing, and NBFC account aggregator put together is now creating that enabling infrastructure for MSMEs, right? And that infrastructure is going to be now based on cash flow rather than the traditional way of asset-based lending, because MSMEs do not have the wherewithal to live up to or get through the process of underwriting and the structures which banks have. Plus, on the other side, even when we see this problem from a cross-border payments perspective, again, while there are a lot of facilities available, a bank line would be available. In reality, when it comes to actually utilizing that, the exporters feel the actual pinch of not getting the money when they actually need it. And plus, with the way the world is now, everybody wants to mitigate their risk. And Vayana, again, we have developed products wherein MSMEs get without recourse financing. And the recourse is on the buyer in the foreign land, which is something, we feel is really a big boon, sort of say, to MSMEs. And the other thing of reducing the paperwork and digitizing the whole chain. Right. So I've just said, so Vayana covers the whole gamut of supply chain finance, account receivables, as well as account payables. And, that's how we provide, we have been able to build the business. And the other side, which I was talking about, monitoring and trade enablement tools. So we have invoicing, GST compliance, and we have also come up with a product to call, what we call is a Good Business Score, This is absolutely free for MSMEs, but what it does is that it gives you a real-time monitoring of how your business, health is, which basically goes through the GST data and other, tracking points, and gives sort of a heads up to a MSME about their business, to a corporate on the, their supply chains, whichever are would be sort of a critical, vendors in their supply chain, about their health. Plus, going down to the last mile, while we talk a lot about lending and a lot about fintechs doing, the challenge happens that can we bring down the cost of credit for the last mile, and how do we do it? And that's where, Vaina has been really stressing on this whole flow-based and trade-based lending, wherein we look at the data, which is the trade transaction between the buyer and the seller, which allows for us to judge the vintage of the relationship, the criticality of the relationship, and base lending decision on that, which has helped us even in these times to remain sort of zero default. This is a small sort of display or infographic on how we work. One of the major USPs is that we do not ask or expect anybody to change their existing processes. Within their existing processes, Vaina fits in without any cost on capex, without any change or training of the team of what to do. It is as simple as an MSME or the corporate to just drop the invoice in a folder on their desktop, and the Vaina system takes over the process from there. My screen is got, yeah. And this is what we do. So, we provide a multi-lender integrated platform to the corporates. It's a fully automated journey. There's no tech investments and no change in systems and formats required. There's a real-time reconciliation so that, if anybody wants to move out of our system, within 5 minutes, you can, pack in bags and leave. So there is no, this thing that people are stuck with us. We don't want that. We want people to be with us for the value that we give to them, rather than making them sink their money and then be stuck with us. Another brilliant thing that which has been there is that we have a zero downtime, and on our GST billions with billions of API calls, that has been the success rate, right? So it's a zero capex, as I said. Automated processes, reducing the cost, higher utilization, of credit line for corporates, better coverage of supply chain, and monitoring and end-to-end real-time reporting. And this is basically our GST business, wherein we are probably about 22% market share. That is almost 1 in 4 invoices, GST invoices have been processed by Vaina. 1,000 plus corporates supported and zero downtime for 4 years and counting. Fingers crossed on that. And last, I will just end with this, slide, because all of us are talking and we see. So this is a picture I've taken from HUL's PSA ad on Save Water. Copyrights remain with them, but the interesting aspect is that a lot of fintechs and a lot of technology and everybody talks a lot about MSME, but this is where an MSME is. And this nice looking sophisticated shower cubicle is what a fintech is. Fintechs are trying to do. And inside that, when you open the tap, you get the water, which is the lending flow, right? And that's where the predicament is, that we want MSMEs to do a lot of things, and we have a lot of nice jargon to share. But at the end of the day, this is where the problem remains in our country. And what we're doing at Vaina is to probably break down this whole cubicle, and MSME can walk in and take the amount of water they want, 24-hour supply, and use a hydroponic technology wherein we can keep on expanding this infrastructure to the last mile, bringing down the cost. ISAs to 1% per month. That's what the cost needs to be, and only then it makes sense that we can even bring the last mile retailer in a formal financing channel. So that's about it from me. A little representation of wherein we are present across the globe for our export factoring business. And thank you so much for the time today. Any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you, Hitesh. I think we'll reserve the questions towards the end in case there are any.
Sure.
Now we move to Mr. Prakash Mengavde, the founder and CEO of Izilient. Prakash,
Yeah. So first of all, thank you, Sudhanma. Thank you, Vishwas, for giving this opportunity to be part of this event. And I think it's fantastic to listen from the the various speakers, the perspective on how the fintechs should be and what space that one should operate and one should. So I represent the Izilient Technology. So what we do is basically we are into the core transaction processing. Okay. So when I say the core transaction processing, it's the layer between, I would say, the modern framework in terms of payment offerings by fintechs or maybe by any players in that sector and the banks. So what we say is basically it is a modern technology which can basically enable the banks to offer the new services. Now, one of the problem that banks or maybe the traditionally what we used to happen is it's sort of built on the legacy platforms, right? So it's like the platforms which has been there in the banking system for years together, and it actually takes a lot of effort and a time to enable the new services from a consumer perspective. So what we try to do is basically build a layer between the core banking or core transaction processing engine and build the APIs and SDK in such a way that whether you're building the mobile apps or whether you're building the the traditional transaction services that you're providing to the consumers, or you are doing the maybe the issuance in terms of cards or virtual cards or whatever, right, or the wallets, it becomes really simpler in terms of enabling those services, right? So these offerings or these product, actually it's like it can either get integrated with your legacy system or it can replace the legacy system and you can build all new together, a complete new platform in terms of offering the services on both sides, right? So whether you start the acquiring transactions, when you say acquiring, it's like initiation of the transaction, or you actually do the transaction processing with the regulatory framework or maybe the everything that comes in that flow, whether it is the risk check or the fraud engine or the limit checks or everything that requires one to do or handle the transaction processing from banking side. Now, what we are actually trying to do from product perspective is trying to enable the all sides. It's like if you accept maybe the payments which is on any channel, it can actually go and leverage. One second, I'm just trying to pull my slides. Yeah. Okay. So our product basically has got a features which is actually trying to accept or enable any channel. So any channel, when I say, it's like it could be a traditional channel. You can think of ATM, point of sale, or payment gateway, or mobile transactions. We can enable any of those things using these APIs. On issuance side, like I said, you can have actual physical card issuance or you can have virtual card. So we call it a card not present kind of scenario where maybe the payment gateways and online transactions comes into play. You may have to manage the merchant network in terms of onboarding the merchants, in terms of making sure that you do the sort of risk check or maybe the things that are required for merchant to onboard and manage your network, whether it is a point of sale network or whether it is e-commerce network. Also, important portion in this whole thing is, I think, the authentication before you actually do the transaction. So you can think of any of the transactions that you do, whether it's on ATM, whether it's on point of sale, or whether it's on e-commerce. I think the essential part of that is also the, unless you authenticate, you are not actually allowed to do the transaction, right? And there are various ways that are available in the market. But the challenge is, it's like a security versus the time that it will take in terms of implementing that, or maybe the how much time you add in terms of the whole transaction time, right? So you can't add more authentication frameworks and make it transaction so lengthy that people will get frustrated and there'll be abandon rate which will be higher than your transaction success rate, right? So what we're trying to do there is actually we're trying to bring a frictionless authentication, which is like based on the customer's earlier history and the transaction patterns. For example, if let's say Vishwas is doing the transaction and paying the bill payment every month, I know that these are the bill payments companies that he deals with every month, and this is the pattern that it follows. I can straight away go and authenticate that payment without actually asking for any authentication, right? But at the same time, if he's traveling, let's say outside the country, now I need to do something else, right? I can't be doing the same thing what am I doing now because he's not within the country, his location is changed and everything is changed. So what can I do is I'll ask or challenge him some authentication, which will be sort of dynamic, right? It is not even a constant, a static authentication that you would follow. It's not your PIN or it's not your card number or it's not like that. So we'll generate the dynamic authentication, and we'll do it in such a way that it basically tells me this is the Vishwas who's trying to do the transaction from some other country, but it's the same pattern, right? Now that's an interesting thing that what we're trying to do is also trying to fit this authentication methodology into the regulatory framework. So if it comes to any regulatory things with respect to any interchanges, with respect to any this thing, we are saying that we are compliant. So today you will see there is a OTP being used widely, SMS OTP for authenticating any transactions. What we are saying is actually we will convert that to a dynamic authentication, and we have done this for in n number of banks, and converted them from so-called as a static authentication to dynamic authentication, and using this adaptive authentication flow, where what I explained a few minutes back, which is like understanding the consumer patterns and then challenging him for authentication rather than doing blindly. Every time you do the transaction, you expect them to authenticate, right? This actually helps in terms of your transaction success rate, and we have actually seen almost from the previous history where it was a static authentication. When we convert to the dynamic authentication, we actually got a jump of at least 60% transaction success rate, which was people used to abandon it from with maybe they have not got the page, or they not got the SMS, or they not got. So there were a lot of things that was in that area. So we're trying to avoid that, and we've got a system which would actually generate this authentication and challenge the customer based on what is the scenario and what is this pattern, right? Then we also do a lot of things on transaction processing, which is again, like I said, traditionally it's been very difficult for on the legacy system to make the changes. For instance, if you want to make any the card controls, let's say you want to bring in some card controls, and I'm sure you are familiar with now today banks are offering the facility where you can go to your card banking, and you can change and say I want to do the transaction in India or not internationally, I want to limit the transaction for 3,000 rupees or not, whatever, right? So those card controls were not in place, let's say, and if you want to bring them on the legacy system, it's actually a lot of things that you need to do if you want to do in a normal way. But in what we're trying to say here is, what we're trying to do with our product suite, we actually provide just a scripting. So it's simple like a Microsoft Excel script that you have to write and say that this is what in this condition, like we do the Excel formulas, right? So we put that Excel formula and then say that based on this you apply this rule. So it becomes really simpler and gives a control to the banks and the payment processor to manage. In our terminology it is called as authorization. So if you manage that authorization flow, and it becomes simple for a bank to actually introduce any regulatory or risk or anything on that sort, right? So 3 things that we primarily our product suite operates into. Like I said, one of them is easy integration. So we build the API layer, which actually sits on the top and helps you whether you're doing a mobile application integration or you are doing any device app integration, it becomes really easy, right? You just start to call the API. You are actually not knowing any insight of how this happens, but you have been just given, for example, if you're on the payment gateway, just say pay and pass on the parameters what are required for the transaction, and it will be done, right? Second thing, what we're saying is, in this kind of scenario, when you're actually trying to operate the banks and trying to build a system for them, Another thing that comes is you have to build a lot of interfacing in terms of the third-party systems, right? It could be your interchanges. For example, it could be NPCI or maybe any of the interchanges that we have. It could be your core banking. It could be your billing systems. It could be any third parties that banking system would interact with, right? Now here, what we are saying is, again, this is going to be very easy with this product is we just need to again configure using the Excel and we just give the formulas and event is done. Which was legacy system used to take actually the full, if I talk little technical terms, it's like a complete software life cycle where you actually do the requirement and write the code and do the testing and then enable it. So all that is gone with this kind of product in place. And we are also saying that right from initiation of the transaction till the settlement. So full life cycle is what we cover using this product suite, so that you don't need to worry of which to integrate with the multiple products, because that becomes again the point of I would say I mean, it will take a lot of time for integrating the different products, right? Had it been a one parallel or one middleware that sits across the system, I think it becomes really easy to interact and covering the transaction flow right from the initiation to the completion and settlement and reconciliation and everything. So that's pretty much that what we do as a Azilion product suite. Where we stand today is basically we have a presence in almost 18 countries with 40 plus customers, and we handle 45 million transactions per month. So that's both using our product which have been implemented in this various banks, and also the cloud platform that we provide to the banks. So that's another beauty of our platform is actually even if bank can enable that platform without actually taking the license from us, because it's available on the cloud. It just plug and play for them, including all certifications, all regulatory requirement, all risk and fraud checks. All they have to do is just use our API, integrate it, and it's done. So that's why we say it is like a cloud ready. And we use, obviously, I mean, I think some of the speaker already spoke about everything is now on mobile, right? So that we all know and agree. So we are saying that for that, there are APIs that we provide. So you think of anything as you talk about NFC payment, you talk about QR code, you talk about maybe any of the payments on traditional channels or on the online channel. We have the APIs available for all of this. So that's pretty much what we do as our Azilion product suite.
Thank you, Prashant.
So any questions, I'm happy to answer.
We will take the questions later. Now we move to Vikas Kumar from Loantap Financial, or his colleague.
So hi, this is Ashish Desai. I will be presenting Loantap. So hi everyone, thank you for giving this opportunity. I'll be brief and I'll just talk about what we do and what we've done so far. So just to introduce Loantap, so we are of course based out of Pune, and we are a digital lender, and we are into almost like 5 years into business now. So just moving on. So basically, what we do is we do digital lending. We do entire process, end-to-end process using technology, and our USP lies in solving customers' issues of converting the loan early tight issues, the flexibility in terms of the repayment options and the turnaround time, and then the lending which we do is largely done by using our own in-house NBFCs. So we have our own in-house NBFCs from where we do most of our lending, besides some of the lending which is being done by our partners. So yeah, what we do is basically fast and friction-free loans.
Ashish, if you can go to the presentation mode, your slide will be slightly more viewable.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you.
So in terms of loans offering, we are into near prime segment of the personal loans, and we do mainly focus on salaried personal loans, but we also do some portion of MSME, but largely our focus is more on the salaried personal loan. We within that, we provide multiple kind of loans, within, be it for medical use, be it for travel purpose, be it for personal wedding, etc., etc. So we do provide all this kind of loans. So basically, what we do differently is how we solve the issues faced by customer is, by providing multiple repayment options, whether it's a bullet free, it's a bullet prepayment, or it's an EMI free or overdraft. In terms of documentations, we are not, we provide flexibility in terms of what customer can offer to us, and by multiple combination of that using our own ML and AI, we do a credit appraisal of the customer to arrive the worthiness of the customer. We also give a limitless facility to customer, wherein he can, instead of borrowing at one time and repaying, he can come and borrow as and when required. So facility being offered is a personal loan, and he can use the money as and when required. Largely, we do in-house based lending, but yeah, we have built significant partnerships with some of the large PSU bank and some of the NBFCs where we do business through. So this is how we do basically add value to overall ecosystem. Is, of course, we add convenience. So the main issue which customer face in this kind of borrowing is because typically in this segment, customer comes to us when he is in dire need of money, and if it is being solved by a lender, then he look forward to get money from that lender. So convenience, low TAT, customized options in terms of payments, in terms of what he needs, and end-use focused kind of a lending. So these are some of the options which we provide in terms of repayment. Typically, this will be the typical cash flows where customer come, borrow, and keep repaying on month-on-month basis. We provide like EMI free options where only customer pays some interest only for some period and then pays interest and all. Or maybe at the bullet, he pays interest during tenure and then he pays bullet on the maturity. So this all helps customer in giving flexibility in the repayment option, because our focus is mainly on salaried customers, and as and when he gets a say bonus or variable payout, he can do a principal payout, and during the tenure he can do interest payouts. This is on the customer journey which we do. Basically, it's multivariate underwriting model. So parallelly, we run multiple process. So shorter TAT does not mean that we do anything less as compared to bank. Most of the appraisals what bank is doing, we also do, but we do in a parallel manner, and that's how our TAT is reduced. So like you see, there's a bureau intelligence and the credit testing, then the validating of the customer data. So this all happens on as a parallel process, and then it goes to ML, in-house this thing. And once it is established, then we do give credit score and social score to customer, and basis that we approve or reject the case. And once it is done, we do either lending through our own private level, which is the in-house NBFCs, or we do through using our partnerships, significant partnerships which we have built with banks and some of the large NBFCs. So this is broadly the framework. In precise in terms of numbers, we are in 5 years in presence, so 620 crore of number. We are almost catering to 22 plus cities. We have served almost 35,000 customers so far. So yeah, broadly this is what we do. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ashish.
Thank you, Ashish. Now we move to Patanjali Somayaji, who is the CTO of our Capital Plot.
So I'm co-founder of Walnut. We are India's best rated personal finance app from our very own Pune. We started Walnut in 2014 on the very simple premise that all the business communication that was happening to you was happening through SMS, but all your personal stuff was moving to WhatsApp and Signal. And at that time, really WhatsApp was prevalent. So if in 2014 or even now, if you looked at your SMS inbox, it's like a stream of unintelligible SMS messages that are full of numbers and letters, right? Like the credit balance is XYZ, your Dunzo delivery is something, your Amazon package is arriving at certain point and all that, right? You don't really, very few, I think still persist sending SMSs when there is no coverage. In fact, at this point, we even do calls on WhatsApp, right? So that has taken over. So this was the situation in 2014, and we realized that the way the SMS inbox was structured didn't really make sense for the type of messages that came up. And about 80 to 90% of the messages that you had in SMS were financial messages. So we decided that, there was a way to mine these SMSs and build out a fully automated expense management system. Because, people who want to do expense management don't want to take the trouble of actually entering what they spend on. If the information can surface itself within, in Walnut, we had a benchmark of about 20 seconds, the information surfaces itself once you install the app. Then you will, take the next step of actually managing your money and figuring out where it's getting spent, etc. So we started off on a very simple expense management and AI-based categorization at the back end on what your expenses were. And we are now, more than 10 million users across the country. We've been at multiple points chosen as editor's choice by the Google Play editorial team, been leading the finance lists multiple times during our 7-8 years journey. We obviously evolved from just expense tracking to a bunch of features around personal finance management, including things like bill reminders, find an ATM with cash, which I will talk about in a bit, and giving smart insights on what kind of spends you do as what kind of spends you do as a user across what kind of categories and merchants on. Like we used to send these at different points of time. Also, we used to send smart insights around different events that would affect you in terms of the budget and other financial events. And we also had rolled out a feature to help you split and pay your cash in with your friends, right? So if you went out with your friends for lunch or for a trip, an easy way to split and complete that. Now, this was the journey that we had. And for us, very importantly, data is at the heart of everything we do, right? So as we collect this data and we make sure that we have the guardrails around privacy and not sharing users' data, but for the user itself, we do a lot of analytics on the data itself. So in terms of the data that we process data across more than 10 million users, a huge amount of SMSs that are processed daily and various insights drawn out of that. We support about 120 banks and cards in terms of the different SMS formats, and this keeps changing all the time. And we have, thanks to the aggregate data collected across various users, we have about 50 to 60% of the point of sale machines in the country actually mapped on our systems, where we know the location, the geotagging, the kind of transaction flow that's flowing through those POS machines. So what we did based on all this data was we built a lot of highly tuned machine learning models, and we predict various financial features like income, salary, net worth, and what the future financial behavior of the user is. So putting all this together, was what we built was what we call the Walnut Prime Score, right? So if you look traditionally, while credit bureaus have been present in India, you'll find that a vast population of the Indian population is actually not having a lot of bureau data, right? There's a huge amount of new to credit, etc. And the question is, how do you lend to this this segment of the population? A lot of focus and effort had been built at the time around lending to people with a bureau score, but there was not much effort on how do you lend to people who are not on the bureau. And what we did was, using the different data points that we have in terms of location, in terms of predominantly SMS, and we co-developed a bureau model which was called Walnut Prime Score, which had about 2,500 variables and derived features. And as an example of some of the features that went in, you can see the table on the right, in terms of what time the person does the activity, what kind of travel that they do, what events come to them on the phone, do they have any check bounce kind of SMSs coming through, that kind of thing, right? What kind of phone they use, etc. And a lot of these data points essentially allowed us to build a credit score that was back tested with the bureau. We did this along with the bureau, and we then partnered with NBFCs to actually lend based on this score. So we were actually the first lender in the first platform in the country to enable lending on something which was non-bureau SMS based data, and also without the requirement for a lot of the documentation like pay slips or any other financial information. So we had a 100% reliance of, obviously there was KYC data that we needed to collect, but from a lending perspective and from an underwriting perspective, we were the first company to go out on a fully non-banking information alternate data lending score in the country when we launched in about 2017. So we enabled Walnut Prime. We didn't at that point. It was in 2017. At that point, it was a very seamless, automated process. You could get the money in your bank account almost instantly. It was an EMI-based line of credit, so up to 1 lakh. But you could even withdraw something like 2,000 to 3,000, and 3, 6, 12. Very simple UI and approval entirely based on the data that we got from you on the phone, based on SMS data and all the backend analytics that we did on top of that, based on all the income and credit scores that we built on this data. This was quite successful. So now let me, with that background, talk a little bit about our journey. So we launched the personal finance app in 2014. We did 2 rounds of funding from venture capitalists. So we had SAIF and Sequoia as our supporters. And we built out this whole personal finance thesis across 1 million users. And we were about 1 million users 1.5 years into the journey, about 18 months into the journey. In May 2016, we were at 1 million users. What happened in November 2016 was that demonetization happened, and we realized that we had data about where people were withdrawing their money and which ATMs were active. Very quickly, within 48 hours, we were able to launch a feature called Find an ATM with Cash, right? So you could open the Walnut app, click a button, and it'll tell you which ATM had cash at that point. And there were lines, if you remember, there were lines across all ATMs across the country at that point, and people are finding it very hard to go to the right ATM and withdraw money. So our feature was successful, and it was actually very useful at that point for a lot of people. And we experienced the viral moment in our lifetime of Walnut at that point. And within 50 days from demonetization, we went from 1 million users to 5 million users, which was really rapid growth, stressed our tech systems, stressed our product systems, and it really transformed where we were as a company at that point. This huge escalation of users that we had at demonetization, there's a picture on the right where the Google CEO is actually showcasing Walnut as a use case for scaling, very rapid scaling was supported by the Google Cloud, since our platform was based on the Google Cloud. And the rapid scaling that we were able to achieve was then showcased, towards the end of, to the beginning of the next year by the Google CEO. This massive amount of user base that we were able to build out in a very short amount of time was what we used to then build a credit model. And we took this credit model with to various lending partners and processes, and we were not a licensed NBFC to lend. So we built it as a platform, got a couple of initial lenders to come and lend this on us. And in June, we launched our first loan based on this data. So our model was always build a distribution, build the data, but actually have financial services as the core revenue monetization part over there. Lending and credit was the first, and of course, we built a few other, and we continue to build, options in insurance and investment on the app. And by January 2018, we had about disbursed 3,000 loans, about 150 crores in disbursals. And towards September 2018 of that year, we were acquired by an NBFC capital float. So this was like a full cycle from a startup perspective. We started out with a financial services idea and a suite of financial service products that we built out. In January of 2018, the question really was, since we're doing lending, should we go and get an NBFC license ourselves, because that's required in India, go down the regulatory path, or partner with someone who is already licensed, but very complementary, looking at scaling the business on the consumer side. So Capital Float today is India's largest BNPL lender, buy now pay later lender. We power multiple programs like the Amazon Pay Later program that you see on Amazon is powered entirely by Capital Float. We also power Make My Trips, buy now pay later financing scheme. We have Walnut itself in the Capital Float family has evolved into multiple credit products across various BNPL and non-BNPL, personal loan kind of offerings. So in September 2018, we took the next stage of Walnut was really to be part of the Capital Float family and become a full-fledged lending platform as part of that. Yeah, so awesome. That's kind of the way of where we are, and happy to take questions.
No, it's great. Thank you, Patan, and thank you, Prashant. I think very, very nice ideas that you guys have worked on. Hitesh, thank you again for joining. there were a few questions, but I do see that people who were posting questions are not. Geeta, you have something to ask? I think Geeta had some questions, but
they can be mailed to me. I can answer them. You can mail the questions. I mean, no problem.
Sure. No, Geeta is there on the line. She's there. Yes, Geeta. I can see that she has unmuted.
Geeta?
Anyway, I think.
Hello.
Yeah. Go ahead, Geeta.
Yeah, I was asking Vishwas, what, looking at the way these fintech companies are evolving, what happens to the traditional banking system in the country? Now do you see them transforming? And all these players like Patanjali started with ATM Finder to the journey to ATM won't be too long, looks like. So what happens to the traditional banks and how do they change? Do they become technology companies or technology become finance companies? So it's all kind of interesting development. So how do you all look at this?
Yeah, should I take that, Vishwas? I have like a view on this. So
go ahead, please, Pradhan.
Yeah. So it's an interesting question, right? So in fact, actually, if you ask this question in another country, like not India, for example, if you ask this question in the US or if you ask this in the UK, then it would be a very relevant question, that is fintech eating the bank's lunch, right? Because that's exactly what they are doing. The reason being that banks over there are not as technologically ahead as the banks in India are, right? If you look at the leading private banks in India and even someone like an SBI, they have very advanced technology stacks and there's the NPCI payment infrastructure that kind of both fintechs and large banks can use. So I don't think in India it is as much of fintechs will eat the lunch of the banks as much as, how do we collaborate with the banks and kind of build out new experiences, right? Like Ishant said, India is so regulated and you need to get into to do something really, like for example lending, you need to have an RBI license. To open a savings bank account, you need to have a banking license, and then if you're a small payments bank, you can't actually do a lot of things that large banks can do. It's highly regulated. So you need to be a regulated entity in India and to really do the full use case. And banks themselves are very technologically advanced in India today, right? So it's more going to be a question of how we partner with banks, or how do fintechs become banks. So for example, Paytm got a banking license. BharatPe is working with Centrum to actually take over. I think PMC Bank can get a banking license. So the path to domination in India is through regulated entities on the banking and financial side. So for startups, we are going to uncover new use cases. I mean, there are neobanks, but if you look at every neobank, it's either got a backing bank at the back. So we will work and we will push the use cases, and we will push the innovation. But it's going to be in partnership with banks and the regulated entities in India for some time to come at least.
So Patanjali and other speakers who presented here who are into lending per se, you guys must be the registered NBFCs or some entities, right? Already.
Absolutely. I mean, you have to be an NBFC to lend in India. So Early Salary is an NBFC, Capital Float is a registered NBFC. I think people who are providing platforms like, for example, Vayana, I think they don't need to be an NBFC, but I believe they are part of, like for the GST piece, etc. They have different regulations that they are part of.
Can I just come in? Do you see like a situation where a company like PharmEasy takes over ThyroCare? No, it would not have been imaginable before. It would be the reverse. So tomorrow it could be the technology companies taking over banks. Could you see that kind of scenario?
Yeah, you're already seeing it, right? BharatPe and Centrum trying to take over a bank right now. Essentially, BharatPe is a venture cap VC funded startup, started maybe 5-6 years back, right? Which worked on point of sale, etc., partnering with a reasonably large financial institution, which is Centrum, but they are taking over. They are looking to take over a bank. If you look at Paytm, coming from financial services, payments background, started from zero, maybe 15 years back, on the VAS space, on the telecom VAS space, transformed into a payments player. Building, and then now they took a small finance bank license, right? They took one of the banking licenses, and I'm sure they will graduate.
Yeah, payments bank.
Payments bank license. They took a payments bank license, so they will graduate into a large bank license at some point. If you follow the news, you can see that Sachin Bansal, who was ex Flipkart, who built out Navi Financial Services, acquiring a bunch of properties is also in the running for getting a banking license. So there are for building out large financial spectrum of services in India, there has to be able to get access to a banking license, and it could be this way takeover, or I also see banks taking over a lot of fintechs as we go ahead, right? Because that also makes a lot of sense. So we see a lot of reverse thing happening where fintechs will grow large enough to become a thorn in the bank's flesh, and then the bank will acquire the fintech 3-4 years from now. So it could be both ways.
Yeah. So I think so. That's what is even happening. So banks want to be fintechs and fintechs want to be banks. I think, but I would say that even the smallest bank probably has a bigger loan portfolio than a lot of the fintechs combined together. So I think banks really have built that moat, whichever you want to say, and probably they'll try to protect it, whichever way, whether by acquiring fintechs or partnering with fintechs. I think some of the banks are very, very technology oriented, as Patanjali shared, and it's sort of a growing sort of ecosystem, I would say, because there are very few countries who have built in public digital infrastructure the way India has built. So first, India Stack was built, and you had things built over Aadhaar infrastructure, and now, as we're saying, so on the same way, the infrastructure is being built for loans and credit to small businesses, and there will have to be a way to partner, because if a lot of us have worked in banks, the way the banks work, they have a certain way to work. I mean, if you see this, and this was a report also in few days back, that all the banks have their UPIs in place. They have it as part of their apps, but how many of us actually go to a bank's app and do a UPI transaction? We are always using a phone pay, a GPay, or a Paytm. So the fintech brings in the agility. The bank, from its legacy perspective, is always looking at covering the risk first, and there will be a good marriage, and we'll have more sort of new proposals coming up in the near future as Centrum, Bharat Pay one has come up, and it is inevitable. But yes, banks do still have a big moat of distribution, a big loan book, so they are big. I mean, but yeah, I mean, dinosaurs got extinct, so we really don't know what the future holds. But yeah, I think the partnership definitely is the way to go forward for everybody. And Patanjali, just to take this moment, I really like your app. Great user of it.
Hey, thanks.
Yeah, and really nice that I got to interact with you here. I think during that COVID time, initially you guys kind of gave a message that you're kind of slow in updates, but I really kind of bank on your app for my monthly, expenses heads up. So.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thanks. I'll take that back to the team.
Great. Hey, thanks everyone. I think we've overshot the time that we had allocated for this, but really, really very interesting conversations. I want to thank all of you. Sudhanva, should we close this meeting?
Yeah. Thanks, everyone. Thanks all the speakers, and also, actually, should we say grown-up startups or fully grown entities, the fintech entities led by Hitesh Bhatia, Prashant Megawde, Patanjali Somayaji, and Ashish Jain. We had very interesting presentations from all of them. And earlier in the day, of course, Akshay Mehrotra, Mr. Ishan Mittal, and to top it all, the veteran Avatar Monga sir. It was very enlightening to see all these different perspectives and how the things are shaping up. While on the call today, we also came across one fintech startup which precisely in this business space that Monga sir was talking about, the B2B space or discovery of the foreign exchange rate for the MSMEs, company called MyForexI. So many such entities who would be enabling the credit growth, credit expansion, and all the other allied services for the MSMEs. More the merrier, and I'm sure we'll have some more interesting sessions as we go along for the benefit of our brick and mortar companies, if I have to borrow the old word from the IT dictionary. So thanks all the participants as well for being so patient in listening to all of those presenters, and also interacting on the chat as well as on the personal questions. So thanks Vishwas also for leading one more session of our incubation and startups committee. And Look forward to see you all and many more in August, the third Friday of August. That's the 20th of August, which, as Vishwas sir mentioned, we'll focus on the defense startups, and we'll have hopefully many more interesting speakers there.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let's close the call.
Thank you. Thank you for organizing wonderful event.